Welcome to my review of Strikers 1945 for the Saturn. And the PlayStation version is actually identical, so this review will apply to that one as well. And the arcade version, which seems to be pretty much identical to the other two. I believe I beat all three versions. And I'll have a link to the tutorial I made in the description for the Saturn version. Now, initially, the final stage in the Saturn version took me around 6 hours to beat, which was fucking ridiculous. What I had to do was, because of the input lag on the Saturn emulators, specifically the Saturn emulator I was using, but it does seem to be a problem across all the Saturn emulators I tried. I had to pretty much memorize my positionings, and I couldn't really rely on my reactions, so it made the final stage insanely difficult. You know, it's very rare that I spend 6 hours on a single stage in one of these old games, but it ended up being extremely difficult. Then when I switched over, after beating the Saturn version, I switched over to the PlayStation version, and I beat that final stage within minutes. Now, of course, I had already memorized a lot of the positions and things, but even still, I wouldn't have been able to duplicate that so quickly, you know, on the Saturn version. It would have taken me a while to do it again. So yeah, just something to keep in mind. If you're playing this on emulators, I highly recommend playing the PlayStation version. And the reason I recommend that over this version is because Saturn emulation is still pretty bad as of the time of this review as far as input lag is concerned. There's a big enough delay to where, for a game as precise as this, I found it to be a huge problem. You can see all the shit that you have to manage, and I had to do a lot of that on memorization, so you see a lot of the dodging I'm doing here. This is the final stage, I believe. And this was the hardest stage. So I really had to have everything planned out, all my positioning and everything. Really had to be nailed down. So it was a lot harder than it should have been. So I do recommend playing this on a PlayStation emulator if you're going the emulation route. Now, if you're playing this on either the Saturn or PlayStation consoles, you should be fine either way. They're both pretty much identical. The arcade version, as good as it is, it doesn't have any penalties for death at all, unless you're trying to do a 1cc run or something, but you'll just start right where you died by putting coins in. Virtual coins, you know. You're probably not going to be playing this in a real arcade. But, so I prefer either on emulation right now, I prefer the PlayStation version since the input lag is much, much more responsive and lower on the PlayStation emulators. But you know, Saturn is still kind of badly emulated when it comes to input lag, as far as I can tell. So my other issue with the game is it's one of these games where it's a very good game, but one of my other issues with the game is that it's one of these games where you don't have any penalties for death until maybe the last 2 or 3 stages. So you're just playing it normally, and you just continue right where you died. You know, you'll use a continue after you exhaust your lives, but you'll just start right where you died. No penalties for death aside from maybe score or some shit like that, but no real penalties. But then on the last 2 or 3 stages, you're hit with penalties for dying, where you have to restart the entire stage if you exhaust your lives. So I don't like the real unbalanced difficulty. I think the game should have just worked like that from the beginning, you know, making you start the stage over from the beginning throughout the entire game, not just, you know, drop penalties on you at the very end of the game. I don't like when games do that. The sequel does that as well on console. But, and the sequel is pretty much equally as good as this one. I couldn't really tell much of a difference. I mean, different layouts, but similar gameplay, very similar. So, overall, I mean, I do like the challenge of the later levels, but I don't like how you only get a challenge on the last 2 or 3 levels of the game because of the penalty system changing, you know. I would rather it be consistent. But overall, it's quite a good game. I give it a 7.5 out of 10, and I would definitely recommend playing it, but if you're playing it on emulation, definitely go for the PlayStation version. Thanks for watching. Let me know if you have any questions.